This is Speak Earth. I'm Case Bradford. Thank you for tuning in to this episode with Ian McNamara. Ian is the founder of Maro, a new clothing company that launched earlier this year, providing natural fiber clothing options. He started with organic toe socks. And if you've never heard of toe socks before, we talk about why toe socks are cool. And that those aren't like little tiny socks that you put on each toe. They're socks, sort of like gloves for your feet. And we talk about why that is through part of the podcast. The rest of the discussion centered around the importance of natural fiber clothing and the clothing system at large. The clothing industry makes around 100 billion garments each year, which is wild, and about 60% of those are with synthetic fabrics. We're finding out this is not so great for human health or the overall vibrancy of our ecosystem, and only 1% of those garments get recycled, which is also not so great. Ian is on a mission to change that over time with Maro. He's off to a great start. He's a new business owner and is already making some impacts and innovations that are quite remarkable. There's a link down below to wearmaro.com where you can see everything Maro has to offer. You can use the code CASE to save a little money if you decide to get some stuff. He's got organic cotton shorts, boxers, hoodies, shirts, sweatshirts, and those groovy toe socks, all kinds of cool stuff. Really appreciate the work that Ian is doing, his creativity and his energy to create a cooler world through natural fiber clothing and raising awareness about the deleterious effects of synthetic fibers. If you'd like to contribute to Peak Earth, I came up with a few ideas. One is to leave a 5-star review on the Apple app or the Spotify app. That always gives me good vibes. Another is to share an episode on social media. A third idea, rent a very large event space and throw an extravagant party. And instead of playing music, you can play episodes of this podcast. Those are 3 ideas. You don't have to do any of those things. Really appreciate you tuning in. Thank you. And I hope you enjoy this episode with Ian McNamara. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Doing great. Glad you put aside some time to connect with me, and I'm really excited to learn more about your story and what you're up to.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. A lot of the guests you've had on the show are great, so it's an honor to be, part of the show.
You are the founder of Maro, and correct me if I'm wrong, you started recently, like this year. You launched?
Yeah, May 16th. So it's coming up on 3 months this week. So it's really new.
That's awesome. And how long had you been wanting to start your own company?
Oh, since I was a little kid. I just I didn't know when it would actually happen, but things kind of lined up to where it kind of needed to happen. So I started out of the opportunity and also necessity to do it.
Is it pronounced Maro, or how do you pronounce it?
Yeah, so it's Maro. So what I did, I was thinking of going with. You may have seen like my Twitter handle is VitaFoz. That was originally going to be the name, and then my mom was going around visiting some cousins and kept asking me how to pronounce that name. So I gave up on that. No one could figure out how to say it. And then I did anatomical, which made sense for the toe sock concept. And then that name couldn't be trademarked because it's a descriptive name. And so then I ended up with Maro, which is a shortened form of marrow, like bone marrow, if that makes sense.
Why did you choose that name?
Yeah, so the concept is that your internal health, the sort of stuff that's impacted by what you're wearing is just as important as the external health. And so, people are working out, training for their sport, whatever they're doing, and they're using these clothes that may, under the surface, be causing problems. And so there was no really, there are definitely some great brands doing it now in the last few years, but if you look at a lot of the big athletic brands, they're not taking a holistic approach. It's all like performance, and no regard for the materials and how they affect the whole body and the whole system, as well as nature and everything like that.
Excellent. And the first product that you went about designing and launching, I know when we think about clothing, There's a lot of different articles of clothes out there. How did you choose which one to create and provide first?
So I actually, when I was thinking of where to start, I remember watching a Tim Ferriss video on just how, like what to think about when you're starting a business, and the first piece of advice was scratch your own itch. So I had just gotten into barefoot shoes, zero drop shoes a year before that. Um, then found out about toe socks. And as I was looking for toe socks, there was nothing that was made with natural fibers. Um, there was a few, but I'm size 13, and they were like 8 to 11 on Amazon, and they're really cheap. Um, so I decided, all right, that's what I'll do. I'll figure out how to make this product for myself, and hopefully other people will like it. And it's turned out that it's a really niche product, but it's turned out that there are people who kind of care about both things. They care about the natural fibers, and they care about foot health and maximizing that as well.
What are the benefits of wearing socks with toes formed into them? Because I know that overwhelming majority of people wear socks that are basically just like a big sleeve that you slide your whole foot into. But I've worn your toe socks; they're very comfortable. They take a little bit longer to put on, but I'm wondering, is there a benefit to putting in that extra effort to guiding every
Yeah.
toe into a toe sock shaped form?
I think so, and I'm not super technical on this. I kind of defer to other people, but the big thing is big toe alignment, and for athletes in particular, that impacts glute activation in a huge way. If you ever try squatting and press your big toes onto the ground when you're barefoot or they're not kind of restricted in any way, you'll actually feel it. And so that's the main benefit, is that for you to kind of maximize your output, um, your toes, most importantly the big toe, has to be kind of in a natural position. And these socks that we wear, and have worn, most of us, since we were a baby, they take that big toe and push it inwards, towards the other feet, kind of in a point, in the same way that restrictive shoes do. And that elastic around the toe, even if you're wearing a wider toe box shoe, will still kind of not allow you to maximize that space, and take advantage of it. So that's the big thing for me. I think comfort, moisture prevention, between the toes, prevention of blisters, all that sort of stuff is secondary to actually letting your feet be in the position that they were designed naturally to be in.
Makes perfect sense logically and anatomically. And in my experience, when I wear them, they are more comfortable. And I believe oftentimes comfort is a byproduct of alignment with nature's a simple harmony between the way things are designed to be and the way that they are. I always feel more comfortable wearing natural fibers. I always feel more comfortable when I'm outside versus inside, with some exceptions, extreme weather events aside. It's when I'm in a better state, I'm always more comfy. And we're all drawn to comfort. We're creatures of comfort. We want to be comfortable. So I know when I wear the toe socks, they're definitely more cozy, and I would prefer to be barefoot when possible, but when I need to put socks on, it is worthwhile guiding each toe into the little sleeve. And you can also wear those socks with sandals, different kinds of sandals, which is very
Absolutely.
fashionable, very fashionable.
Absolutely.
It's also it's beneficial because if you're wearing grounding sandals, then you can still take advantage of having the electromagnetic energy from the earth. When it's a little bit cooler, you can put the toe socks on and still wear those sandals.
Absolutely. And that's another reason why I sort of learned more about this as I, spend more time on Twitter and our, health space. But having an organic cotton toe sock, if you want to do grounding, is kind of a big deal, because most of the toe socks out there are polyester, and that's going to impede that, you know, grounding from happening. So it's kind of goes hand in hand.
It is funny talking about niche. Now we're talking about like toe socks plus earthing
Yeah,
sandals.
Yeah, exactly. It just gets more and more niche, and I've had people try them who still wear normal shoes, and I guess there are kind of ancillary benefits that I mentioned before, like you know, if you're running and you don't want to, or you're going on a long hike and you don't want to get kind of that moisture that grows between your toes. That seems to be what some of the kind of original companies that were doing toe socks were looking into. Um, and then as the barefoot shoe community has grown, there's people realizing the main benefit is the toe split, but it certainly is a really niche kind of thing. So hopefully it can convert more people as time
Yes,
goes on.
I think that'll be for sure what happens over time. Anytime a new innovation and new technology is presented, people will go towards it if it's good and if it's true. And what you've created is, I'm curious what the journey was creating them not with polyester, or how you went about designing them with mostly cotton. I believe they're not quite
The
100% because that's not really possible.
Yeah, it's 5% spandex. Hopefully, I can look into alternatives. That's kind of what I want to do at Maro anyway. Is whenever there's an alternative available for one of these kinds of things that I would rather not have, I work as hard as I can and as quickly as possible to implement that alternative. In this case, I think what I decided was it was better to do 95% organic cotton rather than there not being nothing on the market that was organic cotton. And so that's kind of the hard decision to make. That I think not everyone's willing. Not all brands are willing to do that. Some of them are more very strict about it. But I think if people look at like the underwear that I did, they'll realize that the intent is there to kind of really shift away from this stuff. But yeah, to get to the idea of how I got from the idea of doing the toe socks and the specific kind of stuff that I wanted to do with them to getting them out on the market, I probably dealt with at least 10 factories, not like getting samples from. I reached out to a lot more, and some of them would send me samples, and they would then tell me after I paid for it and got the sample that, oh, actually it's still 30% nylon, but 100% of the outer yarn is organic cotton. There's a lot of games being played, sort of, and um, trying to figure out who was telling the truth and who wasn't. And finally found someone that was willing to do what I asked for. They said it may not turn out, you know, that well, but I think it did. And you kind of just have to, when you're making anything new, these manufacturers are trying to support themselves, and they have their own needs, and so they might be uncomfortable with new things. But if you are willing to bear the risk yourself, I think it's definitely possible if you look hard enough.
Well said, and applicable to pretty much anything in life. When you're trying to do something new, you'll face obstacles and will need to drive forward continuously to get where you want to go, over failures and learning curves to get to that place. And you mentioned a couple of things there that I'd like to touch on. One is like the idea of 5% spandex. I think it seems fine to me to have anything under 5% for the sake of functionality. Seems like not a big
Yeah.
deal when the rest of it's natural fiber. And two, you also mentioned the underwear. So if you wouldn't mind touching on a little bit about the underwear that you created, I think that would be interesting.
Yeah, sure. So the underwear I had started working on a little, like maybe a month or two before the socks came out, but anticipating that response. And I still get comments every now and then about the socks. You ruined it with 5% spandex. You know, how are you doing this and saying it's organic cotton? All of that, and it's minimal, but it's still there. And I totally get that. And so the boxers were an attempt to take something that does have an elastic and kind of from a functional standpoint needs an elastic material in the waistband of some sort. There are boxers I've seen that have a drawstring, um, I think most people probably find that a little bit out there or uncomfortable. I'm sure it's fine. I've never tried them. But basically, if you dissect each of these products and then look for small ways to improve them, whether that's changing the type of fabric or you know something like the waistband. So that's what I did. I found it took me a really long time to find the actual source of the supplier for the natural rubber waistband. There are a lot of people who are upcharging on it all around the world, but it was sort of all coming from the same place. So I found them. They've been super great. They've got a small operation in Europe that makes those, and they actually work with a number of other brands as well. Um, and so yeah, the main thing is that it's natural rubber, which comes from trees. In this case, they're in Malaysia. They're also a bit, to a lesser extent, they're latex trees in Latin America, in the Amazon. But most of it comes from Southeast Asia. So the challenge would be, how do you scale that? Is there enough? All that sort of stuff. But that's what rubber was. That's what tires were made out of. That's what before plastic and synthetics were became mainstream. That's what this stuff was made out of. So a lot of it is there's definitely the opportunity to look for new and innovative alternatives to spandex, but this is just kind of going with stuff that's been around for a very long time. So
Fascinating. I'm curious, how does rubber come from a tree? How does that work?
so I think it's a little bit like it's pulled out of the tree a little bit like maple syrup, if that makes sense. I don't know how it's processed in the end, um, but there are different thicknesses and that sort of thing. But it kind of just the tree gets tapped and it comes out that way.
Oh wow. I was almost thinking it was some sort of part of the bark or like a processed form of a fruit or a nut. It's because cotton is almost like a flowering part of a plant, right? And then they take
Yeah,
that and they process it.
it's the cellulose basically that comes from a plant, and so the cotton plant, and that's why when they're trying to do tencel or any of those kinds of things, they're making a cellulose kind of material out of that original material with the processing. Same thing with bamboo. Um, so it's definitely it's definitely a natural product, the rubber, in that it comes from trees and not petroleum. But I'm sure there's processing involved, as there is with cotton and wool and anything like that.
Yeah, it seems like almost everything is going to have some sort of footprint, some sort of impact on our shared space. I think the idea is just kind of minimize that as much as possible and seek solutions that are circular or regenerative whenever possible.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the challenges of doing the natural rubber is, if I want to move all the production to the US at some point, or at least shorten that supply chain as much as possible. If the main component of making the product plastic free is from Malaysia or Brazil, that makes it, I would say, on balance, it's probably still better for the environment, but it still adds some kind of component there where you're shipping across the world. So there are trade offs, I think, and as a producer, you kind of have to just figure out what your mission is and what you prioritize. And I think that's something that people kind of are come to natural fibers because they're concerned about their own health, and then there are others that are concerned about the environment, and kind of trying to meet both of those standards in the middle and not let down either one of them is part of my goal. So we'll see how feasible that is, but I think it's important to have both of those pillars in there.
Yeah, I find that they're relatively intertwined as well. Oftentimes, those two pillars are kind of one and the same as above and so below. As I tend to use that as a bit of a guiding principle and as a way to understand the world and health at large. And when it comes to fabrics and clothing, I think the number one key is just like the amount, the overall quantity that that we have.
Yeah,
And a lot of people would be well served to bring down the quantity and then to just
of
kind of
course.
bring up the quality if possible. So I think having higher quality clothing, although it's more expensive, a lot of times it will last longer and it will be more comfortable and it will be worth the investment for those who are able to allocate the funds in that way.
Absolutely. I think that overconsumption is a huge problem, and that's only possible because of extremely low production costs where people are being taken advantage of. And that's not like people tend to think of just the manufacturing, like the final aspect of it, but that's up the entire supply chain from the time the cotton seeds are planted, or however, and polyester is more industrial, so maybe there it leans more on the actual sewing process, because the workers may be more technical in those facilities where they're producing the actual kind of filament or material. But I think that that's something that I think people are becoming more aware of. But because of the super low cost, it's a legitimate it's legitimately difficult for people to spend $60 on a t-shirt when something that feels just as good is $20, or that sort of thing. And I've had that from people regarding the boxers. Like, I understand that $25 for a pair of boxers is expensive, and so my goal is to hopefully bring that price down, but also kind of to a level where it's not like people are buying so many of them that they end up just throwing them away. Got to balance both of those things.
Yes, absolutely. So much of it is a game of balancing all these different factors, and the boxers are very comfortable and can be worn swimming if someone lives near a body of water. These are 100% organic cotton with natural rubber.
It's actually recycled, 50% recycled, like some of the other stuff. But I've actually noticed that people are sort of less aware of what that is. So I think I'm going to shift to organic cotton and still maintain the idea that stuff can be recycled. Afterwards, we'll always do that, offer 10% back, which I think is pretty, hopefully generous enough. It's only been 3 months, so hopefully no one has stuff to send back quite yet. But I think that's something that I care about a lot, is making sure that none of my stuff, or at least I'm providing a pathway for none of my stuff to get just discarded in an irresponsible way, which is part of a lot of these big clothing companies, fast fashion companies will sell things and then they'll want to sell you something the next day, and they don't care if you wore that shirt once and it ripped, or you throw it out. So um, yeah, I think the longevity and also proper proper handling of it in the, I guess, end of life of the garment as well.
Recycled cotton seems even like a step up above organic cotton because it's not virgin cotton. It's been given another life. How did you get turned on to recycled cotton, and why is that an important thread or fabric to be using?
So I think the challenge is, so conventional cotton has a lot of pesticides, and there are some challenges with how it's grown, and um, what kind of chemicals are used, what kind of chemicals are allowed to be used. So organic cotton, as long as it's sourced from the right place, doesn't have those same concerns. Um, Recycled cotton, I think, because it's been worn previously and washed so much, you can sort of feel comfortable about exposure to these kinds of like external toxins that it might have been treated with in the past, like formaldehyde. That's the reason why Patagonia switched to organic cotton in the 90s, was that their workers in the store were getting sick from the formaldehyde in the conventional cotton. So I want to be careful about that sort of thing as well. But the real potential with recycled cotton is that, as I mentioned before, if you're importing fabric or even just the fiber itself from overseas, that a huge chunk of the cost is actually transportation cost, like financially as well as in terms of pollution. I think the statistic is that the top 15 mega container ships that kind of send items all around the globe, probably mostly to the U.S. as we're mostly an importer, um, produce more pollution than all of the cars in the world. So one of those ships is responsible for the same amount of pollution as 50 million cars. And so the idea that we as individuals, have to kind of regulate our own behavior, that's something people can do if they're interested in it. But I think getting away from this reliance on shipping things, thousands of miles all around just so that we can beat the price, in one way or another is a huge goal. And I don't want to ramble on, but basically the concept is, if you're trying to make U.S. production more affordable or as affordable as production in China or India or elsewhere, there's the equation of the labor cost, there's the material cost, there's the transportation cost. Our labor cost is not going to go down, and it's multitudes higher than it is in Asia and even in Europe. And so we have to come up with another way to equalize our production costs. So the way to do that is, I think, kind of using all the cotton clothing that we have and that people are getting rid of already within the United States, to cut down on shipping costs, as well as material costs, because it's only 1% of either cotton clothing or clothing in general is getting recycled now. And so if we can get that number up, the cost of recycled cotton will go way down. And then we're basically looking at labor as the number one cost. And hopefully, and I'm not sure how this will work, but hopefully it kind of makes up for the savings that we'd be getting from having everything sourced domestically, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, that does make sense. And I know a corollary within the food industry is that we, as a nation, America, exports as much beef as we import, which just doesn't make any sense at all.
Doesn't make any sense.
No, it's completely insane. But yeah, economics, I think, is the driver behind a lot of this, and through international trade and currency exchange and all kinds of inflows and outflows of demand and supply, it's impossibly complex for anyone like one person to understand. The best we can try and do is see simple heuristics, like to shop locally when we can, and to support our local farmers in the realm of food. And are you familiar with this book called Fiber Shed?
I have heard of the work they're doing. I just found a group that is doing that sort of stuff with wool in my area too. So
it's interesting, cool. Kind of trying to bring like local fabrics and dyes back to clothing. And that, I mean, talk about paying a premium for clothing. That's really expensive. It's like
absolutely
top dollar.
Yeah, and that's the kind of challenge is I sometimes will have to go to Walmart to buy tape or something, labels or something like that. And I walk past the clothing section, never mind the food, but just walking by the clothing section and realizing, like, whether it's there or Amazon or H&M or elsewhere, that's what most people are buying. So I could have a really successful business myself and not even make a dent in the problem. So sometimes that's kind of not too great to dwell on, but the idea would be that not everybody is going to. There will always be people who want organic cotton, or they want regenerative cotton when that becomes more available, and they want the best of the best, and that's awesome. And we need to provide pathways for that kind of stuff to exist. But I think for the broad population, I think we can make a huge impact by replacing conventional, virgin cotton with recycled cotton.
I agree. Yeah, it does. It does seem like certainly a step up above non-organic cotton, and really at par with organic cotton, especially if it's going to be more cost effective. You're going to be looking at something that is superior to standard regular cotton, which is going to be treated with pesticides, and then um, it's you've got all the benefits that you just mentioned, which are important to consider. And so we talked about the toe socks. That was your first product. And then we talked about underwear. What other pieces of apparel have you created so far?
So I made a rookie mistake, and it was kind of a production is slower than I thought it would be, and it's not their fault. It's just kind of the way things happen. And so I launched a hoodie and crew neck sweatshirt in June, which is not the time that people typically wear that kind of stuff. But I do have those available, and hopefully as the weather gets a little bit chillier, people are more interested in that kind of stuff. I also have a T-shirt. So the hoodie and T-shirt are 50% recycled cotton and 50% organic cotton. So you're kind of getting the best of both. The recycled cotton is from Spain, and the organic cotton is from Greece. And so it's fully European sourced. It's made in the Czech Republic. Obviously, that doesn't, sort of align with what I was just talking about before about bringing stuff to the U.S. But I think the goal with those was to just see, how do people react to the concept of recycled cotton, and how do they perceive it? Because I didn't know, and I haven't. There are a few brands who work with it, but I hadn't seen that much of it. So just those were kind of to feel out the reaction to the concept, and I think I've sort of come to the conclusion that at the prices I'm charging, which I have to charge because of the cost of production, that people aren't necessarily familiar enough with recycled cotton yet. But hopefully I can, as I shift sort of to fully talking about everything in the stuff that I post for people, I can educate more about the potential and the reason to. I see it as almost a pilot that people can take part in if they are interested in it.
In terms of marketing your business, what are some of the ways that you've been getting the word out and spreading the message of who you are and what you're doing? How has that been going so far?
So I would say Twitter has been the number one channel for most of the people who found out about the product. It's been amazing to get help from people like you, who have a much bigger following than I do, but are willing to get on board with something that you align with as well. And I at the beginning when I started reaching out to people, I think I had 200 followers or something, and I realized, if you're actually doing something interesting, people will be really open to, talking to you about it and helping you out. So that's been huge is, making connections with people who've then been willing to use their platform to share what I'm doing. Barefoot Will on Twitter, who talks a lot about, foot health and barefoot shoes, was huge. I contacted him back in October when it was barely wasn't sure when I was, or maybe it was December, but I wasn't sure, it's kind of at the beginning stages and seeing are people going to be interested? Like, can I actually place this order? Are people going to be interested in it? And he was super helpful and just gave me a ton of confidence about how, that I could make this a reality. So that's been the number one thing. And I'd encourage people to, even if I've messaged people with, 100, 200,000 followers on Instagram, and they've been interested in the product. So that's been the main thing is making connections with people who have platforms, and also posts go viral, at least relative to my account. A couple 20,000 views is pretty good, and so when I announced the socks, that's what happened. And so, yeah, it's kind of been a slow, gradual process, but it's been enough to get this off the ground. Twitter's a great place for doing that.
Awesome. I agree. It does seem like a great way to connect, and certainly values hard work and passion and creativity and persistence. And if you reflect for a moment on the journey that you've been through so far, what has been the most exhausting part of this process?
I think it's been the kind of constant need to replenish the inventory and figuring out, like first when my first order, like which sizes do I order? And I ordered less mediums than I did larges, and so that ended up being, not the best route to take. So figuring out, learning as I go, and being willing to be out of stock in the most popular size for 3 weeks and kind of ride that, up and down, um, has been an important thing to figure out how to do, because I'm sure it's not going to be the first time I have to do that. And it's kind of every day there's something to figure out that you didn't know that you'd have to figure out the day before. But that's, part of the fun. It's, you're doing it yourself instead of having someone tell you do this or do that, and you're just figuring it out. So that can be exhausting, but it's also exciting in the same in the same way almost. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Two sides of the same coin, and it's good that it's also exciting, not just like purely amazing. Because I can imagine potentially customer service working for creating a apparel brand could be exhausting, but it sounds like you've got mostly good solid customers. But like with things like returns and this doesn't fit, when I imagine running an apparel brand, I could see that being potentially a headache, but maybe not.
Yeah, especially with socks and underwear, because you don't want to really sell that stuff to people again, right? So that's something to think about. And I've just been lucky that I haven't had many returns, or if people have returned something, it's been, like they ordered 4 pairs of socks and they try one on. And a lot of people are generous enough, probably because they've seen me posting on Twitter and they know who I am from there, that they'll say, well, I'll keep this one that I tried on. I paid for it, whatever it is. And then can I send these 3 back to you? And that's, definitely something that, I'm fortunate to and grateful to be able to deal with. I think sometimes small businesses can be treated as if you're, Nike or a huge company, and people, or Amazon, and they have that expectation that, you're gonna, do everything you can, and they don't have to be super polite and that sort of thing. But I haven't experienced too much of that. Only a couple times. So it's been good overall, and I attribute that to the community on Twitter being the place where most people are coming from.
Nice. That is good to hear. And what would you say has been the most exciting part of the journey so far?
I think how I react to, like, what was a good day in May is now just like, I don't know, we're not selling anything, and so kind of climbing up the ladder, and ultimately that means reaching more people and giving them something that they may not have, may have been looking for a long time, and are kind of just finding now. And so making products that I feel like I needed, and that, the fact that it wasn't just me, that's been really exciting, especially since they're really niche products. So
That is cool. That is cool to be able to create something that people have been looking for, and then they find it, and it lights them up, because these things are useful tools. It's not like you're selling silly knickknacks. Like
yeah,
we need to wear clothes, ultimately most days, and so it's important that we have good quality stuff to put on.
exactly, and it's the kind of thing where, I'm sure there are plenty of business opportunities, but that I could have tried, but I always wanted to do something that I felt like, whether that's, 2 years from now, 10 years from now, has some kind of impact at scale, and not just, like there's the need to, survive myself and make enough money to live off of. But once I've got that taken care of, my goal is to really, make an impact on the industry as a whole. And that might sound crazy from where I'm sitting now, but I think you've got to have that goal. Otherwise you won't get there. So if you're not thinking ahead, there's no possibility. So
Absolutely, it's no, there's no cost to dreaming big. Might as well dream visualize the biggest impact and the brightest potential future. Because if you don't, you might just get exactly what you visualize, and then you think, oh dang, I should have
yeah,
should have reached a little bit bigger.
exactly. And I what I'm glad about is I don't have to feel any guilt, about what I'm selling. And there are a lot of companies out there that, big or small, are kind of doing that, or they're not aligned with the mission and what they're selling. And so I'm glad that I'm selling stuff that I wear. When I have women's clothes, obviously that won't be the case, but for the most part, it's stuff that I'll be using every day. And I haven't had to buy clothes in a while, which is nice. So yeah, it's overall, it can be stressful at times, but it's good stress and it's fun. So
Nice. What do you think about a toga? Do you think we could bring back togas if we made a natural fiber toga? You think anybody would buy that?
I think that would probably sell better than that buffalo beard that I've seen a couple of times. I think it's definitely possible. Particularly, maybe where you're based at, it gets a little cold out here, so maybe one that's made out of, I think, bear skin or something like that might have a better shot. Um,
I was
although
thinking
that, yeah, go ahead.
I was thinking animal fur is like there's some opportunity there because it's pretty cool. I think it would be probably extremely expensive, but there's something about that, and you don't see it very often. I know you're up in New England. You can
Yeah.
reveal your location if you want, but I grew up there
Mhm.
myself, and you get cold because the winter is harsh, and most of the winter wear is polyester, and I think there's partially a good reason for that because you want it to be repelling moisture. Natural fiber actually doesn't do a very good job of that, and if you're wearing it over a natural fiber sweater or something like that, it's not touching your skin. So and I'm curious to hear you reflect on that. One, are there any moisture repelling natural fibers, and two, how you approach wintertime? What are the opportunities there?
Yeah, so I think the main thing is, so the main jacket that I wear is wool. It did, and I'm looking for a better option, but it does have, that kind of, I don't know what it might be, polyester. It might be kind of a cellulose silk kind of liner on the inside, and a lot of them have those. I was wondering maybe if I could, because that's literally the only synthetic part of it. If I could get a tailor to cut that out and replace it, or maybe that'd be too complicated. But I actually find that wool does pretty well in the rain and does pretty well in snow for the most part. Because if you think of sheep, they have to be outside a lot of the time too, and so the fiber is kind of in a way that cotton is not. It's better equipped for inclement weather. I wouldn't go out in a rainstorm. But the other alternative would be like the beeswax coated jackets. So there are people do use wax cotton. Um, some of that is synthetic wax, so that's not great. But that's kind of something that I've thought about a little bit. There's a fiber that's made from banana leaves. Alex Crane, I'm sure you've heard of that brand. They just came out with swim trunks that are made with this material, and I've reached out to the company that makes that fabric, and they're very strict about no synthetic, kind of water repellent. So they figured out a way to do it, but it's just expensive. So launching a project like that, where you have to buy a minimum amount of fabric, and then you have to like get the people to make the jacket or make the whatever the garment is something I hope to be able to do at some point in the next year, but it's expensive. So that's where I'm on that now. But I think there are there are natural alternatives that exist.
To give an idea for folks on what he means by expensive, those swim trunks are $125 a pair for they're made of like 100% banana leaves apparently, but it definitely results in a pricey pair of swim trunks.
Of course, and that's the thing is like you're looking at that, which I'm sure some people are very happy with, and they're comfortable spending that. And so, a company that came out with $100 pair or even $150 pair could could pull it off, and so there are definitely people out there who are interested in that, but you're not going to make a huge impact unless you can reach the people who are getting a pair of swim shorts on Amazon for $10, and that's a long ways away. And the way I think you get there is by scale, and maybe instead of buying a three pairs of swim shorts every summer, you buy two and you let those go for 10 years or something. But it's just a lot of educational work to get people to think about things that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially because it's a difficult sell when you're communicating these things, through the internet or directly to someone speaking with them, because polyester is very much well accepted, and most people aren't going to think about the fabrics that their clothes are made out of from the standpoint of like, oh, this might be harming me. Oh, this might be contributing to microplastics in my lungs or in my skin or in my food. Or it's a gnarly issue at scale where when everyone has everything plastic, and we're just starting to realize this now. We're like at the cusp of this new awareness that, oh, dang, everything's plastic. That's not so good. We got to start doing something about this. And it's expensive. And this is happening from many different angles. It's happening from the food that we're using, from like the light bulbs and the technology and all these things. We're discovering, oh, this progress that we thought was innovation in technology actually has a downstream consequence on our health and vitality. And we're all kind of looking around. You can see these graphs of the rising American illnesses and disease, and everyone's pointing fingers at different things, when in reality it's this conglomeration of different processes that are breaking down, that we were under the illusion that they were technological innovation, and now we're saying, oh, dang, this is this is not so good. We need to create a new world, create a new way of doing things. And it's definitely going to be slow, but every time somebody turns on, they can tell somebody else, and over time we can create change and build a new world.
Exactly, and doing it without shaming people or that sort of thing, and ultimately overwhelming people, because you've got one person talking about this and then that, and then it's like, well, that's actually the most important thing for your health. And then someone who's completely new to it is just like, all right, I'm just going to go back to the Doritos and the polyester shorts or whatever. So you have to meet people where they are, and I think that that's something you do a great job of doing, and I think that's the way that it's going to happen. And I also think normalizing things like that's where the financial incentives are so important. Like, how do we make it so that it's better for Walmart to carry banana fiber swim shorts or recycled cotton T-shirts? Like, can we get the price down to that level where then people who aren't super conscious about it are also buying that stuff? Like, what if all the beef on the market was regeneratively raised, grass fed, and everything? Then you don't have to go then tell people this is much better and all of that, because the bad stuff, or not necessarily bad in the case of beef, there's a spectrum, but um, if that's the only option and it's the best option available, then ultimately we've kind of landed where we are. So we don't have to convert everybody, but we've got to convert enough that it kind of becomes the norm. I don't know if you've heard of this idea of it's kind of like minority rule or something. So like if 3% of the population has a really, really specific requirement, everything will kind of meet their needs as long as it doesn't interfere with other people. So if there are enough people that will only buy this kind of fiber or this kind of beef or this kind of chicken, whatever it is, maybe that's the way we do it, with like extreme intolerance for these nasty kind of things that we're kind of used to at this point. But
yeah, and you know, these things change fast. I've seen a real uptake in views, and just in the past month, I've seen a few massively viral videos or posts just talking about drawbacks of polyester and why natural fiber is more important. And people have been saying this sort of thing for years now. I think I get turned on to it a year or two ago, and have seen a lot of viral internet art catch on the web, and a lot of people get turned on by that and become more aware of it, and it'll keep happening like that over time until enough people are aware of it, and then you'll start to see more brands taking action. I'm curious when the first big polyester brand will shift gears and be like, well, we're done. It might be Patagonia, it might be Viore, it could be any of these brands that are currently all in on polyester because it's so profitable. At some point you'll start to see them shift potentially and say we're going to get rid of the polyester, or maybe they'll hang on to their business model as it's been, and they'll start to see a decrease in profits. I'm not sure how to play out, but I think it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, and I think where I sense it going is kind of them relying on these bio-based. We're already seeing a little bit of that alternatives. I actually explored a bio-based nylon last year as I was kind of thinking of how to launch this, and ultimately it's not biodegradable. So the waste is the same as a conventional nylon. It's just made with, and there are probably better options being developed in this vein, but the waste and the disposal of it causes the same problems, and probably the same problems with microplastics when you're washing it. So ultimately, that would probably be better if we're using less petroleum to make clothes. But that's the direction that I see these brands going in, where they can kind of squeeze out as much of the sustainability narrative as they can without truly changing their products too much. And that's where the opportunity exists for brands like mine or Riker or Wave or Soul Apparel and different brands that are making things that meet the needs of people who've had that shift, and then they're just like, well, what do I do now? And fortunate that there's a ton of stuff out there now. So,
yep, it's we're definitely fortunate to have the ability to create better fabrics and wear better fabrics, and tell our friends and family that not to invest in any more plastic clothing if possible, to shift towards natural fibers, because they really are more comfortable and more harmonious to the health of us and our loved ones and all the life on the planet, which is pretty cool. It's pretty cool that we do have the ability to create clothing, and more technologies will emerge, like the banana leaf fabric you mentioned. That's a fairly new innovation, and I'm confident that we'll continue to see more of that as more attention, as more money goes in the direction of the natural fibers, as opposed to the petroleum-based, plastic-based, polyester synthetic fabrics that have been the norm over the past 40, 50, 70 years, whatever it's been.
absolutely. I think the future looks bright. It's one of those things where people are, every day you see people becoming more and more aware. I don't know when this will be posted, but I know there is the guy last week that posted about looking for alternatives to polyester shorts, and got that post went viral enough to get a community notes saying that polyester is perfectly fine. But ultimately, some people might look at that and say, oh, whatever. But every time something like that happens, people are looking at it, and then either they're going into a store or they're asking the customer service of one of these big brands, like, why don't you have these options? I really like your shorts, but do you have any natural fiber options? And then maybe, ultimately that's kind of beyond just like the idea of making a lot of money. That's what I want to do is, force these companies by providing enough competitive pressure to give in and provide that option. And then when they do that, they have so many consumers already that people will just start to adopt it, and maybe in the next couple decades we shift over. So we'll see.
Absolutely. And I'm hopeful and optimistic that this will happen as well. And I'm grateful that you've chosen this path to lend yourself to. I'm excited to see what will come in the future of Maro, and how you continue to expand and offer better fabrics and natural fiber clothing for everyone involved. And appreciate you taking the time to join me to create this podcast episode as well. Really enjoyed learning more about natural fibers, Maro, and your journey so far in business. I'm excited to see where it goes.
Yeah, I really appreciate you having me, and it's exciting to be, part of this. I think every time that a new brand pops up, I could view it as competition, and anyone could view it that way. But I think it's actually a really good sign that someone thinks that it's possible, and there's a market out there, and that market's only growing. So I think that this is a really good time to be starting something in this space, and appreciate you giving me the chance to talk about it with you.
Absolutely. Really enjoyed our conversation, and everything will be linked down below where to connect with Ian and check out Maro. Ian McNamara, thank you.
Thank you.